I want to thank everyone for coming this afternoon, and I want to thank Joanne Conklin. We've worked on this for over 2 years, and you know, for me, it is so sweet to have former students coming back, and I know that Leslie and Roger and Richard and other faculty who may have worked with this threesome appreciate and admire everything you've done since they left Brown. So thank you for coming back, and thank you for bringing your work. Thank you for sharing time with students. That's why we're all here. And so I'd like to ask you a few questions. First of all, I want to find out what your impressions are of coming back to Brown.
Oh. It looks exactly the same. I just went down, there's like the same graffiti is actually even in the bottom of the stairwell. So that's a superficial thing, but there's something about that feeling of the paint. I know we have new paint now, but it smells the same when you go up in the painting room. So there is kind of, I mean, for me, the most striking thing is just how little has changed. Of course, I feel like I'm the same age as all the students, and I realize that we look like old people, like real grown-ups or something to you. But when I'm here, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, I'm 19 again. That's very personal.
Yeah, actually, something very similar about memory. That maybe because I live in New York has this violent way that you're like, oh, I used to come here, and now it's gone. You know, like I used to go to that bar that then became a clothing store, that then became a so there's like this violence to your past that's always being done to you. And what's really amazing about coming here is like, oh yeah, this was my studio, and I'm talking to someone who's in my studio. The studio is exactly the same. It's great to have these few pockets where you can go back. Which I went for a run, and I'm like, so I still live here, and then we moved here, and it's just good because you kind of take stock. But then some things you just remember, like there was that weird undulating thing in this lecture hall. Always, you know.
Yeah,
What happened there? Wasn't it? Oh, that's it.
Well, it's a mistake, but it is new.
Okay.
It's funny that because I started coming back to Providence a couple of years ago because I teach sometimes at VISTI, and but I get so busy down there that I don't that I almost never walk up the hill. It's funny, I've been a block away from Brown for the past couple of years, and I've sort of never stepped up here, and so it does feel the same, you know. There are things about Providence that I miss, though. I mean, I don't know if it, when I first came to Brown, the old train station, you still came into Union Station, and that was a very special experience. And the river wasn't opened up. Was the river open?
It opened as I was leaving.
Ah.
I don't know much about it, but my sense is that also because I spent a lot of time in modern culture and media doing video production, my sense was that there was maybe more porosity between the departments then. Like I felt really very comfortable in both worlds, and I don't know how many people here are in both those spaces, but it seems like the production side of that department has changed quite a bit. But we're not in that department right now, so I don't know.
Well, I think that there are a lot of things happening, probably more now. I mean, it's always been great, but I think there's probably more interdisciplinary work being done now with departments that would have been less predictable in the past. So now that each of you have presented your work, I'd like to find out what sort of common threads you see among one another. And if you could talk a little bit about maybe some of the surprises that have happened to you just since being back and looking at one another's work.
The connection of language between the three of us is really interesting. I was really struck by that, and we're all talking about language when we're talking about our work. I was a classmate of Paul, and then I was in the biennial with Carrie. I don't think we ever met. If we did, it was at some cocktail party. But I loved that Joanne and Alexis sandwiched me between, these two people who I had a direct and a remote connection with.
Well, I felt like we were twinsies by the end of your presentation. I thought, so much dealing with like these spaces and how they're represented through film, and that, as I was saying, like that sort of push-pull of identification and critical distance, and was thinking too about the role of reenactment in my work, which is maybe here only evidenced through the critical mass live performance, but when you were talking about, and then my question about how the technology gets mediated through your body and the hours that it takes for you to directly translate what you've seen and what you remember and what's happened over great time into great space, is a really sort of striking to me sense of kind of personally owning and then reproducing for the world those narratives and those spaces, which I can really identify with, but I might not, had I not heard you speak about it, and now that I imagine you in those Marianne Doan classes that I was in too, I totally see it, and I feel like, yes, so we're twinsies.
And it is a kind of performance too, and you're directly dealing with performance, and actually with the way you talk about, the word and also the difference between reading something silently and then enunciating it.
And actually the work I didn't show is mostly a reenactment, reenactment of making of objects, like trying to remake Edison's first recording machine. And I think when we were here, I think it was really like postmodernism was, I think it's interesting that I think the three of us depart from the idea of like there's pre-existing texts and we are readers of pre-existing texts. And that relationship is one of deconstruction, but also love of the text. So like we're both like taking it apart, but we also love it. And I feel like I always begin with that. And I didn't even take a semiotics class, but every single person I knew took it. So that's what everyone talked about. And I was doing computer science, and I was like studying language, and that took a lot of math. I was like, oh, this is another language. And visual arts, this is another language. And but also I think at one point it clicked is like I need to be a reader. But that was also, I think, the postmodern condition at the moment was like originality is dead. Then you're like, okay, then you're just using pre-existing text as a score, right? So this idea of the score, like the film makes the drawing, this other film makes this other film. Like I'm making a piece now, and the point of departure is that this boat sank, it had this. So I'm looking at what was lost, that's this list. So that's the score I'm going to follow now.
I think also, when you talked about sort of finding these pre-existing texts and that it's actually out of love, that one recreates or engages with them. And this is something that kind of blew my mind when I was here at Brown and first read Roland Barthes' work, and the notion that the critic takes these objects because he loves them, that it's truly this act of deep commitment and investigation. And when I was at Brown, I graduated in '97. We were kind of in the full throes of identity politics, and a lot of extremely didactic but very important work was being made. I remember the Black Male show was up at the Whitney, and I think that we're in this interesting place now where one can have both a highly seductive, formally complex, visually engaging, strategically pleasurable relationship that is also critical, fundamentally. I mean, like that you're not saying, screw you, Bloomberg, I'm gonna, the fact that you give him the first key, and that there's this sort of like generosity of spirit in the work that feels to me like a necessary evolution from that moment that I came out of.
Do any of you have a vivid, specific memory of making something here?
Oh, so many.
What kind of materials were you working with?
Oh, I think for me,
the moment that one
there was one like I got the Flexible Flyer Award. I think it was in 1986. It hasn't really kept up with inflation. But at the time, I had this crazy idea that I was going to go around the country with these like sheets of lead and do these reliefs of manhole covers across the United States and with like a rubber mallet. I don't know what I was thinking, but I think what was incredible was that I think that was the first time that I was like, I'm going to go out in the world and make art, and it was super scary. But I was like, that happened a lot at Brown. Like, you always thought everyone else had it together more than you. Like you said in the script, like running out, like no one can see me cry, or like, oh my God, everyone's just trying, no one can see me, or like no one can see how scared I am. So I was like, I proposed that I would do do this, and then I got the award. And I was like, shit.
I have to do it.
Like, I have
Did
to
you do it?
Yeah, I totally did it, and and it was terrifying. And then I made some really bad things.
I just wonder, Wendy, one of the best things anyone said to me as I was struggling through my second painting class, which I told her already that she said this, but you don't have to be able to paint to be an artist. So I stopped painting. It was the best thing I ever did. Such a terrible painter.
Jane Camp. Jane Camp taught painting. And I was like, Jane, I'm gonna blah, blah, and then she just looked at me and said, Paul, everyone can have good ideas. And she was, and at the moment, what she was trying to say is like, that's just not enough to make art. And I was just like, oh. And that really like, took into my brain.
Yeah, I remember making things here. I remember my first drawing class with Richard Fishman, and I remember making a drawing of the plants in the greenhouse, and that was just a thrill. It was like, wow, it's like this exotic garden in there. They were like animals, you know, these plants. And then when Hugh was giving me that stick. I mean, it wasn't just a twig, you know, it was a stick that he cut in the studio. It was made out of like a ripped piece of pine, you know, and they were very dry, and they were so thin. I mean, most people, you know, I mean, you probably all, it's something that teachers do, you know, you draw with a stick, and, you know, it's like, it's a good try, you know, but I really got into it, and it was like, you know, it has that real blackness when you dip it that you kind of can't control, but then you get that kind of, the stick gets dry and you can make the grays, and I know that, you know, even when I put the sticks away, you know, that's still something that, you know, is a sort of a technical experience today. But, yeah, well, I loved being here. I had a funny time here because I don't know how funny it is, but I came here as a transfer student, and then I just had I had some health problems, and I left school for 4 years, and so when I came back, Brown was just incredibly supportive of my illness, and really invested. I just can't believe how supportive they were, and that they really stayed in touch with me and really embraced me when I came back. And of course, by the time I came back, I was healthy, and I was so like hungry and clear, and it was, that second round coming back here was just magic for me. I'll always be grateful.
Do you have any advice for students leaving Brown?
Leaving Brown.
While they're here, what should they be doing?
Well, I think I've taught a lot of places. I just had to go to every university that was close when I was in that job. And I think that, you know, it sounds like boosters in the brand, but the open curriculum is really basically, you won't find that anywhere else, except maybe bar, which is full of everyone who can get into crowd. But basically, I think you know, you always give advice based on your own experience, and I think my experience was that because of open curriculum and pass-fail, I could do like a class in the art department, complete intellectual history, pass-fail, history department because it's so crazy hard, and then it was like a 3-semester course called Intellectual History of Feminist or something. Yeah.
See, I dropped out of that. I was so intimidated. I
only drew the reading list a few years ago because I still had this. Like I really didn't need them. I just faked my way through it. And but just the capacity to take this broad sample that is really taught at a very high level is kind of pretty unique. Because other schools have like the curriculum where like everyone must take these things, but they're not taught by really sharp practitioners because they're being taught as this is the general core. Versus like when I took math classes at Brown, it was being taught by a really good mathematician who expected everyone in the math class to become a mathematician or at least operate at the level of a good mathematician. So it took years to put it all together, but yeah. So I would say you have to take advantage of that curriculum because it doesn't really exist anywhere else. Pretty much.
I would offer maybe some just kind of like really simple pragmatic advice, which is that now it's so easy to go online and access everything that's happening in contemporary art that you really have an advantage that we didn't have, and that you know anything that gets made has been documented and you can find it somewhere, and so you should do that. But I think you should also not forget that you're in pretty close proximity to one of the major art capitals of the universe, which is New York City, and so. If I can be bold, I would say that my sense is that you undergraduates in the department, most of you need to bone up on your, is that the right word, on your contemporary art history, that you should be going out and seeing a lot more work and hold yourselves to the very high standards that other departments do too. I mean, and kind of like take, you know, make no excuses or take no prisoners or whatever, like really get out and see as much work as you can, and that is your competition, and those are who you should be comparing yourself to. And so that might sound like tough love, but I really think it's important to know what's going on now and not to feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. So as you try to learn the pragmatic and technical skills that you need to be able to make what you want to make and the way you want to make it, you should also really know what everybody else is doing and making. And there's really, being where you are, there's no excuse not to. So I would say, get me out the door, after this lecture and go see the biennial or something.
Right, and 3 other former students from Brown are in the Whitney Biennial now. Keith Marison, Shana Luker, and Carl Handel. So it just happens during every biennial.
just to echo what you said, what's interesting about being an artist as an intellectual pursuit is that actually my first semester I tried to be an engineer. I took engineering 3, and I was like, it was too deferred. I was like, I want to make things. I'm not going to get to make things for almost 8 years, right? You could argue that you're an artist the minute you take your first art class. You're a bad artist, but you're an artist, and so you are in the field immediately, and you can participate in the field immediately. It's not a deferred dream. It's not like first I got to do my undergrad, then I got to pass this test and go to graduate school, and then get my license, and then I'm an artist. It's like you actually are an artist now. You can go to the galleries, you can go to museums, and you can immediately be like, yes, no, yes, I'll do it that better, I'll never do that, and just engage. And there aren't that many fields where that kind of praxis happens so quickly. So what she said.
Yeah, and actually, I agree with that, but I also believe in, holding yourself up to and doing what you do. Finding what you need to do for yourself, and it's important to know what's going on, and that's part of the research. But it's also important not to get so professional that you're trying to recreate that, because that just doesn't work, right? By the time you finish making the thing that is successful, then you're already on to the next thing.
And I think I'm speaking more, it sort of sounds so crappy when it came out of my mouth, those are repeating gifts, but I do think also it's hopefully you get inspired by doing that too, and it's just a turn on, it's just like, wow, this is so great, now I'm going to go back to my studio and work twice as hard.
Yeah.
And so one other thing, I would say, all the voices that you hear from all your faculty, just remember they're just voices, and also they're not always right. So if I came into your studio yesterday and told you that I thought you should do X, Y, or Z, you probably, maybe you really shouldn't. But to invite, if you can keep that kind of open dialogue with lots of different people, and you start to realize they're all telling you different things, I think you become better at trusting which of those voices feel right, and when you kind of know it's right, even if it's not what you want to hear, then that's where you go. I would say. That took me a while to figure that out. I was so eager to impress people that I kind of didn't really listen, or I would get defensive, or, I think that kind of knowing how to deal with the incoming voices when you're a student artist is important.
And maybe this is my thing, but I think it's probably most artists' thing, is that just keep collecting information and data. Everything that you make by hand or by computer is not art. You know, like for instance, the drawings that I carry around with me in my purse, I really don't think of them as art. You know, they really are ways for me to collect information. You all are such, you know, like, you know how to do research so well. And, you know, there's a lot of that involved in making art, too. And it's not just sort of research about other people, but it's just sort of like reading the world and documenting it and, you know, sort of understanding what it is that you saw yesterday and how it relates to what you're going to see tomorrow. You know. Sometimes you don't know. You know. And actually, that's why I do the accordion folds, because I don't want to turn pages. I want to see day 1 and day 5 at the same time. You know. So just, yeah, pay attention to those spaces in between.
Well, and on that note, I think we should end and enjoy the reception outside. And thanks again for everything.
Thank you.